Florida has one of the highest execution rates in the US, but very few of those who face the death chamber have been women. In this video, we uncover the chilling stories of the only women executed on death row in Florida. From the notorious to the forgotten, we'll examine the crimes that led them to the electric chair or lethal injection, their final meals, and the last words they spoke before death. If you're fascinated by true crime and the darker corners of history, hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive like this one. Now let's journey into the final moments of Florida's most infamous women on death row. Judy Buenoano, the Black Widow. Judy Buenoano's story is a dark weave of deception, greed, and cold-blooded murder. Born Judy as Welty in 1943, she would go on to become one of Florida's most notorious female killers. By the time she was apprehended, investigators had tied her to a string of suspicious deaths spanning nearly 2 decades, all connected by one disturbing motive: insurance money. The first victim was her husband, James Goodyear, a US Air Force sergeant. He returned home from duty in Vietnam in 1971, only to fall gravely ill shortly after. He died within a few months, and Judy collected multiple life insurance policies, totaling tens of thousands of dollars, a sizable sum at the time. But that was just the beginning. In 1978, her partner Bobby Joe Morris also died under mysterious circumstances in Colorado. The symptoms mirrored those of arsenic poisoning, just like Goodyear. Though no charges were filed at the time, authorities later exhumed Morris's body and confirmed arsenic in his system. Then came the most disturbing twist. In 1980, Judy's paraplegic son Michael drowned during what was supposed to be a peaceful canoe trip on a river near Pensacola. The canoe capsized, and Judy claimed it was a tragic accident. But forensic evidence later showed the boat had been intentionally tampered with. Authorities also discovered she had taken out several life insurance policies on Michael just months before his death. In 1983, another boyfriend, John Gentry, nearly died when his car exploded. He survived, and it was this failed murder attempt that unraveled Judy's string of crimes. Investigators uncovered arsenic-laced vitamins, forged documents, and a chilling pattern of eliminating those closest to her for financial gain. After years of trials and appeals, Judy Buenoano was convicted and sentenced to death for the murder of her husband and the attempted murder of John Gentry. She was also found guilty of grand theft and multiple counts of insurance fraud. The case shocked the nation, not just for the brutality of her crimes, but for how calculated and emotionless they were. As her execution date approached, Judy refused to request a special last meal. Instead, she was given the standard prison dinner: steamed broccoli and asparagus, fresh strawberries, and a cup of hot tea. It was a quiet end to a woman who had left a trail of death behind her. On March 30th, 1998, at 7:13 a.m., Judy was strapped into Florida's electric chair, nicknamed Old Sparky. She declined to make a final statement and faced her fate in complete silence. She was the first woman to be executed in Florida in 150 years, and her execution marked a grim milestone in the state's history. Witnesses noted her cold, emotionless demeanor as the current was applied, just as calculating in death as she had been in life. Aileen Wuornos, America's first female serial killer. Aileen Wuornos' life was a whirlwind of trauma, violence, and controversy that spiraled into a series of killings that stunned the nation. Born in 1956 in Rochester, Michigan, Aileen's early life was marked by abandonment, abuse, and instability. She was homeless by her early teens and survived through hitchhiking, theft, and sex work. By the time she reached her 30s, her name would become forever etched in American criminal history. Between December 1989 and November 1990, Wuornos shot and killed 7 men across central Florida. All her victims were middle-aged or older men she encountered while working as a prostitute along the highways. Their names included Richard Mallory, a convicted sex offender and electronics store owner; David Spears, a construction worker; Charles Carskadden, a part-time rodeo worker; Troy Burris, a sausage salesman; Charles Dick Humphreys, a retired police chief and child abuse investigator; Walter Gino Antonio, a trucker and police reservist; Peter Seams, a missionary who disappeared, though his body was never found; Wuornos claimed the murders were acts of self-defense. She told police and the press that the men had attempted to rape or assault her, but the evidence didn't always support her claims, and prosecutors painted a picture of a cold-blooded serial killer who killed for money, cars, and personal gain. Her mental state became a point of fierce debate, as did her rapid descent into notoriety. The media swarmed her story, turning it into a tabloid spectacle. In 1992, she was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death. Over the years, she gave several erratic interviews, at times showing remorse and at other times blaming the justice system, the media, or unseen forces. Her case inspired the 2003 Oscar-winning film Monster, in which Charlize Theron portrayed Wuornos and earned critical acclaim for humanizing one of America's most infamous female killers. On the day of her execution, October 9, 2002, Eileen refused the traditional last meal. Instead, she asked for just one thing: a single cup of black coffee. There was no ceremony, no indulgence, no request for comfort food. Just bitter caffeine and silence. At 9:47 a.m., she was strapped to a gurney in Florida State Prison, where she would be executed by lethal injection. When asked for final words, she delivered one of the most cryptic and bizarre farewells in death row history. "Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie. Big mothership and all, I'll be back." Witnesses reported that she appeared calm and composed, almost detached as the drugs entered her system. Within minutes, she was gone. Aileen Wuornos remains one of the most studied and debated female serial killers in US history, a woman shaped by violence, consumed by rage, and remembered as much for her final words as for the deadly path she walked. While Georgia has executed hundreds of prisoners, only a handful of women have faced the ultimate punishment. Their crimes were shocking, their stories unforgettable, and their final moments deeply haunting. Let's talk about their lives, last meals, and final words of every woman executed on death row in the state of Georgia. In 1945, Lena became the first and only woman ever executed by electric chair in the state of Georgia. Lena was a black maid working in rural Cuthbert, Georgia during the Jim Crow era. Her employer was Ernest Knight, an older white man who reportedly kept her in near captivity. According to trial records and later accounts, Knight would lock Lena in his grist mill, sexually assault her and threaten her life. Despite repeated attempts to escape and seek help, she was forced back under threat of violence. The breaking point came on one harrowing night in 1944. Lena claimed Knight had come at her with an iron bar during a dispute. Fearing for her life, she grabbed his pistol and fired a single shot, killing him instantly. She didn't flee. Instead, she turned herself in immediately and told the sheriff it had been self-defense. But in the deep south of the 1940s, Lena Baker stood little chance. She was a poor black woman accused of killing a white man. Within hours, she was arrested, tried, and convicted by an all-white, all-male jury. The trial lasted less than a day. She was sentenced to death. Despite public outcry and her own plea for mercy, Lena was electrocuted in Georgia's electric chair, nicknamed Old Sparky, on March 5, 1945. Her final words were simple but unforgettable. "What I done, I did in self-defense. I have nothing against anyone. I am ready to meet my God." For decades, her case lingered in silence until it was re-examined by state officials and civil rights advocates. In 2005, the Georgia State Board of Pardons and Paroles granted Lena Baker a full and unconditional pardon, acknowledging that she should never have been executed. Though not a Florida case, Lena's execution remains a haunting reminder of the racial and gender injustice that once defined the American South, and how some voices are only truly heard long after death. Kelly Renee Gisandana, the only woman executed in Georgia in the modern era. Kelly Renee Gisandana's execution in 2015 marked a chilling milestone in Georgia's criminal history. She became the first, and so far only, woman executed in the state since it reinstated the death penalty in 1973. But her case wasn't about a woman who wielded a weapon. It was about manipulation, betrayal, and the deadly cost of jealousy. The crime took place in 1997 in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Kelly, then a 28-year-old mother of three, was locked in a volatile marriage with her husband, Douglas Gisandana. By all accounts, their relationship was deeply troubled, filled with separations, reconciliations, and emotional turbulence. During one of their rocky periods, Kelly began an affair with a man named Gregory Owen. Rather than file for divorce or walk away, Kelly plotted something far darker. She convinced Owen to murder her husband so she could collect life insurance money and have Douglas permanently out of the way. Owen later testified that Kelly had coldly laid out the plan, even encouraging him to make it look like a robbery. On the night of February 7, 1997, Owen lured Douglas to a remote area under the guise of car trouble. Once there, he stabbed him multiple times in the neck and back, leaving his body in the woods. Kelly played her part flawlessly, reporting Douglas missing and even acting distraught. But when investigators dug deeper, the threads unraveled quickly. Owen confessed, striking a deal with prosecutors for a life sentence in exchange for testifying against Kelly. Kelly was convicted in 1998 of orchestrating the murder and sentenced to death. What made her case particularly controversial was that the actual killer, Owen, would live, while the mastermind, who never physically harmed her husband, was marked for execution. It sparked a wave of appeals, protests, and even clemency pleas from religious leaders, including Pope Francis. During her years on death row, Kelly experienced what many described as a spiritual transformation. She studied theology, counseled fellow inmates, and wrote letters of reflection and repentance. Prison staff even described her as a model inmate, someone who had found faith and remorse. But despite multiple delays and a flood of last-minute appeals, the execution was set. On the night of September 30, 2015, Kelly was served her requested final meal: cheese dip with tortilla chips, Texas fajita nachos, and a frosted diet lemonade from Chick-fil-A. Strapped to the gurney at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Kelly remained composed. Moments before the lethal injection began, she sang the hymn Amazing Grace in a soft, steady voice. Witnesses described the atmosphere as emotional, officers reportedly tearing up as her voice filled the chamber. Her final words were directed at her children and those she had hurt. "I just want to say God bless you all, and I love you, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, and I hope through this you get peace and healing." At 12:21 a.m., she was pronounced dead. Kelly's case remains one of the most debated executions in recent US history, a haunting example of how masterminding a crime, even without physically committing it, can carry the ultimate price. The execution of women in Florida is rare but unforgettable. Judy Buenoano and Aileen Wuornos became infamous not just for their crimes, but for the eerie calm they held at the end. Their last meals were modest, their words unforgettable. Their deaths remain part of Florida's haunting death row legacy. Only 2 women have been executed in Georgia's history: Lena Baker in 1945 and Kelly Gissendaner in 2015. Their stories could not be more different. One was a poor black woman fighting for her life in a racist system. The other, a suburban white woman involved in a cold, calculated murder for love. Yet both met the same fate. Which of these stories stunned you the most? Leave a comment below and let us know. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with fellow true crime fans. We have more chilling tales coming your way.